Peace-loving black Trump super supporter shot dead hours after giving pro-Trump interview. A man named Burnell Trammell was gunned down in Milwaukee shortly after an alleged dispute over his Trump signs. Why doesn't his Black Lives Matter to Black Lives Matter agitators? I'm not a fan of that question. I don't know. I really doubt people are going to speak up for this guy. I think it's fairly obvious to a lot of people. But I would say his life does matter. The real question is, why doesn't his life matter to the media? This is why I'm a critic of the media all the time. The protests, the riots, the escalation, it's always because the media props up these stories. Not this one, but the other stories, and they falsely frame them. So when George Floyd lost his life, everybody in the media agreed this was an atrocity. It was horrifying. Let's blast it all over the news. I'd like to see something similar for this man. He was a black super Trump supporter. He has signs, 2020 Trump, 2020, re-elect Trump, 2020. He knows what 2020 is all about. Holding a sign that says, vote Donald Trump 2020. Apparently someone had talked to him about his support for the president. And then shortly later, when the guy came back, somebody had gunned this man down. And they believe it may have been related to his signs. I believe this man's life matters very much so. I believe Black Lives Matter. Now, the movement, the fundraising, the weird donations, the far left that are co-opting that name are turning it into something entirely different. If we want to talk about fighting for justice, it includes this man. I'd love to see the media actually bring it up and say Black Lives Matter. I don't think they will, though. I've gotten a lot of comments because of what's been going on in Portland. And I'm talking about the police, they're being attacked. And sure enough, like clockwork, you get a bunch of people commenting on Facebook saying things like, you never speak up about police brutality, blah, blah. The fake narrative. How many moderate, liberal, independent, conservatives, not progressives, did speak up about George Floyd? Basically every single one. All of them. I mean, you saw Sean Hannity, Glenn Beck talking about George Floyd. I dedicated countless hours to what had happened to George Floyd. I even read the coroner's report. And this is never enough for these people. And then when I put out a video like this, talking about the horrifying tragedy that is the loss of this man's life, they pretend like it's biased, like I don't actually care about the cause, because it supports a Trump supporter. This man should not have died. He should not have died. And we don't know why. Now, Trump supporters are already saying he's a hero and he's a martyr. At the very least, there are two ways to view it. If it's true this man got into an argument over his support for the president and was killed because of it, you better believe they will view him as a martyr, someone who died defending what he believed in. But at either rate, it's a sign of the escalation of crime, the crime that's been going around across this country, escalating, specifically murders and gun deaths. Either way, he's a victim of everything that's happened in the past 2 months. I mean, for all we know, he owed somebody money, but I really doubt that was the case. What we have gotten, and you know what, regardless of that, what have we earned, truly earned from all of these riots? The far left has brought about police demoralization, the defunding of the police, and an escalation in lethal crime. That's all we've really gotten. And today, riots are still expected. They're expected to get worse than they've ever been, and they're escalating. And the real problem that I see is the media, because they're not going to put him on CNN primetime. They're not going to put him on MSNBC primetime. They're not going to say his life mattered. They're going to say he was internalizing racism or some other stupid nonsense, and they will completely ignore it. And when I post this on Twitter or Facebook or anywhere else, they'll say I'm biased and only bringing it up to support Trump. They'll ignore every video I did about George Floyd. They'll ignore every time we've talked about Breonna Taylor, because to them, it's all about power. That's why they won't talk about this man who should still be alive today. Let's read this story. This is from BizPack Review. They say, Marxist Black Lives Matter activists are curiously silent after black Trump supporter Burnell Trammell was murdered in Milwaukee hours after he reportedly gave an interview explaining why he supports President Trump. Police are investigating the possibility of a political motive for Trammell's tragic killing, News Talk 1130 reported. According to the Daily Callout, Trammell, 60, was gunned down on July 23rd near the very spot where he gave a video interview a few hours before, explaining why he supported Trump. The motive is not clear. including whether the slang was tied to Trammell's political beliefs or Trump support. Trammell was a Rastafarian street preacher who advocated for President Trump's reelection both in front of Milwaukee City Hall and in his black majority neighborhood. This guy apparently was very well known. I don't know anything about his beliefs. None whatsoever. He's got, there's photos from a blog. He's got a bunch of stuff I don't understand about the tribes of Israel and things like that. Maybe he believes things I really disagree with. That's entirely possible. In fact, I bet it's likely. In all likelihood, this man probably believed a bunch of stuff I'd probably think was crazy. And it doesn't matter. This man is allowed to stand out with his signs and preach what he believes. That is the First Amendment. And we want to protect life. This is the most fascinating thing to me is how blatantly obvious it is right now with all of the fake news about Portland, how political everything is. The lies about every single action taken in Portland. The federal police standing on their property, being pelted with bottles and water and milkshakes and commercial grade fireworks. People are cutting through these fences with circular saws and starting fires. And the feds are standing there for the most part. But whenever they finally come out and try and disperse the crowd, now they're the evil villains. And that's why we're not going to get this from MSNBC, from the New York Times. I mean, maybe. Look, let's be fair. But the reality is, what we learn from stories like this is that the news cycle is currently controlled by political operatives. That's it. I find it really funny because we often hear people say, like, the media won't cover it. Well, local media tends to. But national media is absolutely dominated by left-wing voices. And this is the fault, in some ways, of conservatives. Conservatives react to the left-wing narrative instead of presenting a narrative and rolling with it. I don't know why they shouldn't do that. Many people have talked about it. It's also true that conservatives tend to comment on news reported by the left instead of reporting it on their own, which is why it's great to see BizPac Review bringing these stories up. Now, they absolutely do challenge the Marxist Black Lives Matter individuals. And I will absolutely say that it's unfortunate that the phrase Black Lives Matter has become a slogan for a far left group of individuals. Now, at its core, the true meaning of what it is, does the life of a black person matter? You better believe it. And no one doubts that, except for a few fringe group of awful racist people. Most people would see this story, no matter what their political affiliation, and they'd shake their head and they'd be sad. It's just an old man with some signs, bro. Calm down. Why do you got to kill somebody over this stuff? It's horrifying. The same is true for people who are victims of police brutality. We got to have accountability here. Instead, what we're getting is political operatives in the media and on the ground taking advantage of the sentiment. And that's why you will not get this. You see, Fox 6 News, they covered it. Local news will cover it. The people of Milwaukee will mourn for a man that they knew, that they saw preaching all the time. And maybe a lot of people think he's crazy. I'll tell you what, I know some pretty crazy people, and I would not wish this on them. No, I'm not even I'm opposed to the death penalty, man. I'm very much opposed to this. Let's read a little bit more. Police say Trammell was shot to death around 12:30 p.m. in front of his business, Expression Publications. Trammell's storefront is plastered with Trump 2020 signs. Reggie Moore, the director of the Milwaukee Office of Violence Prevention, told the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel that he had intervened in a dispute between Trammell and a young man that was related to a Trump sign that Trammell was carrying. I mean, well, there you go. The police haven't confirmed it, but we got a witness, right? It's the director of the Milwaukee Office of Violence Prevention, not even some random witness. Trammell was well known in his neighborhood for his pro-Trump advocacy and his religious preaching. Neighbors fondly remembered Burnell as a friendly, peace-loving man. The guy was just full of love. Local residents Dick Nelson told Fox News. Adebisi Agoro said whether you agree with Trammell's political views or not, people respected him because he had conviction, unlike countless political phonies who chant hollow mantras but don't understand what they're advocating. He was a community figure, Agro said. I respected him because he had a position. He got his opinion on why he feels that way, and I'm not going to knock him. Senator Ron Johnson tweeted, Burnell Trammell was known to many in Milwaukee. My condolences to his family and friends. I'm glad to see that there are people speaking up for this guy, and I'm sad to see that this has happened. And I know, most of you know, he's not going to be given the proper respects that he actually deserves. What we're going to see is a far left machine I believe that right now, a lot of what we're seeing from the political establishment in support of Black Lives Matter is specifically because Donald Trump's support in the black community is going way, way up, according to several different polls. Not all of them, but there's at least 3 or 4 polls showing Donald Trump has massive support from the black community. Donald Trump today retweeted a man who was talking about how the Democrats don't care about you. They rejected the stimulus bill all the same. And that it's never been about, race. They don't care about your race. It's not even about Trump. It's just about power. Trump retweeted that. We're seeing, we've all seen Kanye West. We are seeing the rise of prominent black conservatives. And this is what the message that gets sent to people. Now, some people have pointed out, we don't know 100% what exactly happened to this guy. However, they do make note that black conservatives are frequently attacked with, accusations. They're called racial slurs. I've personally witnessed these things. And this is what I just can't stand about the modern left. This is the nightmare scenario. When I talk to my friends and they're saying all of this propaganda, and guess what? They're all white. You start to see how truly horrifying it is, especially for me coming from Chicago. A large group of protesters in Chicago apparently went to the mayor's house demanding the police be defunded. Do you know where the crime happens in Chicago? Like the violent crime, the murder? It happens in the poor areas. It's not exclusively the black community. It's the South Side, and it ranges, there's different minority groups across the South Side. We need the police. I've had my problems with cops, 100%. But these are the areas that need the police the most to be held accountable for one, but to actually make sure the crime doesn't happen. Now, of course, when a crime is happening, the police can't get there in time. They're not perfect, but the police patrolling can help prevent this stuff. They can help get criminals off the street to make sure that people don't lose their lives. And what ends up happening? Mostly white protesters from affluent areas that don't experience this crime go to the mayor and say, defund the police. It is shockingly racist. It is shockingly white supremacist. Now, maybe I don't mean it in the proper way they use it. They claim proper. What I mean is when you have a bunch of white people who live in, affluent suburbs, and these are the progressives are mostly college educated, making $100K a year. That's the average progressive activist, according to the Hidden Tribes report. When they don't experience any of this crime or violence, and then go to the mayor and say, take away their police. This is exactly the problem with the defund the police movement. In the end, what do you get? Just like with the McCloskeys, who are able to hire private security, you will see rich people, when the police are defunded, hiring private security guards, buying weapons, and defending themselves adequately. It will be the poor communities that will have no way of protecting themselves. It'll be the poor communities that are overrun with violent crime, taking away their resources. It's truly a fascinating thing to behold. That instead of saying police accountability and police reform, they're saying defund. In some instances, disband, and others, abolish. Just get rid of it? Imagine if they went around saying that Medicare wasn't functioning properly, that it was corrupt, therefore we must abolish Medicare. You'd be like, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. Abolish Medicare? Why would you do that? People need access to medicine, even if it isn't perfect. Yeah, people need access. You'd say reform it, fix the problem. That's not what they're advocating for, though. They say defund means defund. It means take their money away. They say, yes, we mean abolish the police. And in the end, it is the poor who will suffer. And the rich will have their fancy private communities, their gated communities, and they'll put armed guards in front of them. Many of these suburbs will put up fences and gates, and they'll protect them. And they don't experience this level of crime anyway because they don't live in these big cities. But they want to take away from you the people who swore an oath to uphold the Constitution and protect you. That's what they want to take away from you. Imagine if the fire department came out to try and put a fire out, and then they fumbled around, fell down, and actually made the fire worse. And so they came out and said, abolish the fire department. You'd be like, wait a minute, there's still fires here. Okay, we gotta get a better fire department. Now, to be fair, many of them advocate for new kinds of policing. But if that were the case, you don't abolish the police because a small percentage, and a very small percentage, of police encounters go wrong. They have ulterior motives. They're lying. And that's why they won't tell you the story of this man of this man, Bernal Trammell. They won't tell you his story. They're not going to prop him up. They're not going to put it on the website. They're not going to prop up a Trump supporter. Of course they won't. It's sad stuff, man. We got some more. They say naturally the Marxist Black Lives Matter movement said nothing about this black life that was lost due to street violence. Why? Presumably because Trammell was murdered by a white cop. Presumably because he wasn't murdered by a white cop. Black Lives Matter, they show this tweet. 7 years of fighting, growing, loving, and winning. Every day we have shown up for Black Lives Matter, and we will continue. Deep bow of gratitude to all chapters and Black-led groups showing up for Black life. Yeah, for sure. I'm down with that. I saw a video from PragerU, and Will Witt, their host, asks a group of young black men, I believe it was like at a skate park, maybe not, how many unarmed black men had been killed or black people had been killed by the police. And one guy says 1,400 in the past year. He's like, in the past year, how many think have been killed? It's like 1,400, hundreds, thousand maybe. The answer is, depending on your source, 9 or 13 have been shot and killed. The amount of individuals who have been choked or killed is a bit higher, but still extremely low relative to the hundreds of millions of police encounters that occur across this country every year. But the narrative is that the cops are bad, the cops are evil, the cops are doing wrong, and it's propaganda. For those that aren't familiar, because I mentioned something called the scaling problem very often, but I do want to make sure I can mention it in this scenario to explain how they manipulate the media. If 100 cell phones, brand new cool cell phones were released to 100 celebrities, and 1% was broken, that's a lot. You get one guy going, hey, my phone broke, and people will be like, how'd you break it? Why'd it break? That's weird. Most people wouldn't care. You hear one story about a broken phone, so what? But that's still 1%. Now, what happens if they issue 100 million of these new phones? And it goes out to everybody, but 1 million of them are broken. That's still 1%, the same margin of error. But now 1 million people are screaming, and everyone hears it and says, whoa, what's happening? All of the phones are broken. That's how social media works. One person in Portland gets grabbed in a viral video. A second person gets grabbed in Portland in a viral video. 2 videos. That's it. 2 videos. And the officers are wearing police patches, and they have the patches on their arm identifying who they are with their badge numbers. And now there is a widespread narrative that secret police are roaming the streets of Portland, snatching up peaceful protesters who did nothing wrong, which is absolutely not true. This is the scaling problem. Because now with social media, you will have 100,000 people all saying the same thing, playing a game of telephone where they regurgitate fake news and then spew it out. And every time someone tweets a bit of fake news, someone else picks it up. It's called information laundering. And then eventually you end up with people who believe just absolutely psychotic information. Now, I've experienced this myself. There was a post on a far left forum about bringing guns out in, I believe, Portland, and this was like a year ago. And so I tweeted it out like a far leftist is talking about bringing guns. Someone else then screen grabbed it, wrote an article, and then another article emerged and it says the far left is arming up for a riot. And that's information laundering too. It's not unique to any one faction. The difference? Conservatives and moderates will be banned from social media like that. The left is allowed to engage in overt and insane conspiracy theories. I mean, take a look at what Twitter did with QAnon. I don't know much about it, nor do I care. I hear it's just a lot of bunk nonsense. So Twitter banned 7,000 accounts, shut down a bunch of links, and said, no more of this. Okay, fine, sure, whatever. Your platform, right? But when it comes to left-wing conspiracy theories and fake news and lies like the police, they just let it go. You literally have 2 conspiracy theories. One that alleges Trump is fighting the deep state. To clarify what I mean about not knowing a whole lot about it, that's the gist of what I know about it, like Trump is fighting with the deep state or something. That there is an establishment government that is out of control and fighting against the president that must be stopped. On the left, you have an insane conspiracy that Trump is a Cheeto dictator fascist who has deployed secret police around the country, he hasn't, to secretly rendition and detain people. It's basically the same thing. What's the difference? And now thousands of people are showing up and attacking federal law enforcement officers. Why does Twitter allow one and not the other? All that matters in the end is that they're skewing people's perspective of what's going on, leading to a lot of dumb people to just believing the fake news, ignoring stories like this, and banning those who dare call it out. In the end, regular Americans who aren't politically active are probably sitting there right in the middle as the whole narrative shifts to the far left. In the end, I imagine regular people aren't going to be happy with this. There was an ad that was produced about the riots in Portland. I tweeted about this. And it shows the mom block linking arms. It shows the federal law enforcement officers beating that guy who was standing, in front of the fire, the guy who claimed to be a Navy vet. And they say that Trump is a fascist, he's a dictator, and this is Trump's secret police and all that. And I thought to myself, they really underestimate American selfishness. I don't mean that in a disrespectful way. I mean, Americans, like any other person, are focused on improving their lives, taking care of their friends and their family. It's what we do. Not all of us are thinking globally, though many of us do want to make sure we are respectful to our communities and the larger global community within reason. Most people right now are probably just thinking about what I've got to do, what work I'm doing, what I'm going to eat for lunch. And guess what? They are not rioting, least of all, protesting. So when this ad was purchased and it shows the police pushing on a group and there's tear gas everywhere, what do you think Americans will be thinking when they see that ad? The idiots who produced the ad will, because they have no idea what's really happening in this country. They're of the perspective that as soon as the American people see these police officers, tear gassing people, that they'll side with us. Do you know what people really see? They see a riot. That's it. That's all they see is a riot. And they get scared. And then you say Trump is going to send in the police to shut everything down. They're going to be like, good, make it stop. Period. They're not protesters. They're not rioters. And they're not going to sympathize with those who are rioting and protesting. And that's where we are today, man. I don't know, kind of broke away off the subject at hand. But let me make sure I wrap it up with, talking about this man, Burnell Trammell. I don't know what these signs mean about Prophet Jonah. I don't know anything about that. I don't know anything about Rastafarianism or whatever he represents. I don't know who he was. I don't know if he was a good guy, a bad guy. I don't know if he saved a bag of kittens moments before this. I don't know if he hurt a bag of kittens. I don't know anything. The point is, he deserves to have his story told. He should be alive right now. His life mattered. The same as Breonna Taylor, the same as George Floyd, and these people who have lost their lives. His life mattered. Of course, it's not going to be mainstream, high-level news cycle news unless we decide it is. Like David Dorn as well. Fine, CNN, MSNBC, they'll ignore it. Well, then we won't. We will be the ones who say Breonna Taylor should be alive. George Floyd should be alive. And this man, Burnell Trammell, should be alive too. How about we be the ones to make sure we say that these lives, the lives of people, they matter. And I'll tell you this, as I've said before, if someone comes to me and says Black Lives Matter, I'll say, hear, hear. You're right. They do. I think the lives of everybody matters. And if you want to use this to represent the loss of life in this community that should not have happened, I will stand with you when civil rights are violated. And if you want to talk about the police officers who are being injured and being blinded, 3 officers may have permanently lost eyesight due to the lasers in their faces, their lives matter as well. If you want to talk about the cops who've lost their lives in the line of duty, their lives matter all the same. You have no right to take someone's life. I 100% oppose the death penalty. There's a much larger conversation around this because, just to clarify as we wrap up, when we defend ourselves, sometimes tragedy happens, and we should never celebrate having to end someone's life, in the name of defense of ourselves or our communities. That's the main point I want to say when I say I oppose the death penalty. But sometimes, things are bad. In this instance, this dude should be standing there on the street corner today holding up his sign, and he's not. But he mattered. So it's up to you guys to make sure that people hear this and learn about it and ask the question, why won't the media bring this guy up? I'll see you all at 4 p.m. over at timcast.net. Thanks for hanging out.